Ancient gods weren't necessarily benevolent beings, and when things went wrong, punishments that were doled out could be so extreme that they're almost hard to believe. With how Odin punished Loki, which was after what Loki did to his son, and more, we've got a doozy of a list today, so let's get into it. So Loki is one of the most complex characters in all of Norse mythology. He's a trickster, a shapeshifter, and a master manipulator. He committed a lot of crimes in Norse mythology. There's a list as long as my arm, but some of his most infamous acts include creating the world serpent, tricking Odin into killing his son, helping giants kill the sun, betraying Asgard by delivering it to the giants' leader during Ragnarok, and so forth and so on. Of course, Loki also has redeeming qualities that make him more than just a villain, but that's not the focus of today. So how was he punished for his wrongdoings? Well, here's the thing. Loki had quite the sharp tongue. Too sharp. He could cut people with his words. He could hurt them without even meaning to do so. And when you're a god who lives in Asgard and you've got a reputation for causing trouble, that can make you unpopular very quickly. So Odin decided to take action. He sewed up Loki's mouth and told him to keep quiet until Ragnarok came along, which wasn't going to be for a very long time indeed. And that's not all. After being captured by the gods for his crimes, Loki was subjected to 3 more types of punishment. He was bound under the roots of a great cliff, and that's where he remained until Ragnarok. He was chained to a rock as punishment for killing Baldur, and a serpent dripped venom onto his face. The other gods had to catch the venom in a cup and then empty it into a funnel that led out of Loki's nose, allowing him to breathe. The serpent would not die or stop dripping venom until the end of Ragnarok. And that would be the end of Loki. Bound on top of 3 sharp-edged rocks while a snake gnawed at his lower body. Yeah, none of that sounds fun, but it's hard to hurt a god otherwise. So long ago, there was this crazy big war between the gods. There were essentially 2 big god tribes in Norse mythology, and before they could sit along in one feasting table, they declared war on one another. Now we're talking war after war after war. And then there came a day when the gods felt kind of tired about what they had been doing. They decided to draw the white flags and assemble for a peace treaty. The way to seal said peace through both parties, according to the gods, was to exchange hosts. So one side they were like, okay, Honir and Mimir, they're gonna come to Vanaheim to live, and then we've got some other gods, Njord, Freyr, Freya, they're gonna come to Asgard. The point was 3 of one set of gods were respectively the chief god, the prince, and the princess of one area. And then on the other hand, we've got minor gods. Coming to Vanaheim, those guys, they were welcomed, especially Honir, who managed to persuade the Vanir gods that he was the most benevolent figure in the cosmos. Vanir gods thought that Honir could answer any question, but they didn't think that he could because Mimir told them the answer. And the truth was revealed because, well, Mimir did come along. So those gods came to realize they had been tricked with this hostage exchange. They decided to off with the head with Mimir immediately. The body was chucked away while the head was sent back to Asgard, straight to Odin. So you have to understand, Baldur was the most beloved god in Norse mythology. Being the son of Odin and Frigg, he was the god of light and justice. But he could not live to fight with the gods of Ragnarok, as Loki, on purpose, indirectly killed him. So as Loki knew only mistletoe could hurt him, he quickly found a mistletoe and turned it into a very sharp arrow. He gave the arrow to the innocent and blind god Hodur, and guided the blind god to throw the arrow into Baldur. After getting nailed, Baldur died on the spot. As the gods knew Loki was the one who conspired to kill him, they were like, Loki, you're gonna face a death sentence. And now you know how that went. Oof. So if it wasn't clear by now, Odin was the king of the gods. He was the father of most of them, and in some accounts created everything, heaven and earth and humans, and that's how he got the nickname, God, Allfather. He had a special high seat where he could see everything in all the worlds. Only he and his wife, Frigg, were supposed to sit up there, but occasionally other deities snuck up when nobody was looking. But his wisdom didn't come cheaply. He bought a drink from a spring of wisdom at a high price, one of his eyes. Now yes, this drink made him more wise, so he spent 9 days just hanging out from the tree, a name that I can't pronounce, pierced by a spear to get even wiser. And during that experience, he symbolically died and was reborn. Apparently he was embarrassed by his empty eye socket because he usually covered it up with a broad-brimmed hat or a deep hood. Whenever an old man with a deep hood strides into a saga, yeah, you're like, hey, Odin, how's it going? So Thor was the son of Odin and Earth. Now, while Odin stood for violence and war, Thor represented order. He was the god people called on if they wanted stability. He was immensely strong and manly. Once the king of the frost giants stole his hammer, he refused to give it back unless he could have Freya for his wife. So the gods agreed, but then they tricked the giant. Thor dressed up as a bride and Loki as his bridesmaid, and the two of them went to the giants' hall. The giants invited them to sit down at their table, and Thor proceeded to devour all the food and drink and all the mead in a most unbridled manner. Loki claimed that Freya Freya hadn't eaten in days, so she was very excited about her wedding. She was like, I'm starving now. Captivated, the Giant King called for Thor's hammer so that they could swear their marriage vows on it. Thor grabbed it, ripped off his veil, and killed all the giants at the feast. That's the end. Hadingus and Hearthgrippa had an unusual relationship. Hearthgrippa was a giantess who nursed the human Hadingus when he was young, and as he grew up, she offered herself to him as a lover, explaining she could change her size and shape and was willing to shrink down for him. He embraced this, and the two traveled together. Now, it all went well until she used magic to save him from an attack by a mysterious giant hand. Magnifying herself, she grappled with the hand so he could chop it apart. However, in doing so, she went against her own kind, and a group of giants arrived and tore her apart. Well, Junior recovered remarkably fast and went off on a new adventure. Goodbye! The Big Bad Wolf, one of Loki's descendants, was destined to devour Odin during Ragnarok. To keep an eye on him, the gods decided they would raise him in Asgard. Sadly, this wolf grew too quickly, and the gods were like, you've got to be bound. So they tried a lot of different chains, and each time they tricked him by saying the chains were only there to test his strength. Inevitably, he broke all of them, but the gods clapped and cheered, secretly hoping to find a chain the wolf couldn't break. Finally, they went to the dwarves of Svartalheim, who agreed to form a chain out of rare metal. Things like a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, and a mountain's roots, and therefore couldn't be broken. So they bring this new chain about, and Buddy's a little suspicious, because it's pretty light compared to all the other ones. So he agreed to test it if only one of the gods put his hand in his mouth while he was trying it. The only god brave enough was Tyr, who was his keeper when he was a pup. Well, they put on the chain, Buddy couldn't break it, and then he tore the hand clean off. Heimdall, the dutiful watchman of the gods, supposedly has a few important tasks during the big chaos of Ragnarok. So for starters, he sees the approach of the giants and then blows the big horn, alerting the other gods of what's coming. So as the giants storm across the bridge to Asgard, he finds himself in conflict with who? Loki! So these two are kind of ancient enemies, and they represent opposite Norse attitudes. Loki, with his crazy sense of mischief, appealed to many of the Vikings. But then we got Heimdall, with his sense of duty and honor. The two face off as the giants doom Asgard and plunge the world into the sea. Who wins? Nobody. It was a brutal, brutal, brutal battle. So Valkyries are essential in poems and stories about legendary hero warriors in Norse mythology. Riding on horses to battlefields and escorting the souls of dead warriors to Valhalla, they're Odin's handmaidens, and they're depicted as prominent figures in several ancient texts. Valhalla welcomes worthy warriors with mead, but Valkyries' deeds are not always good, and there are a lot of situations when they disobey the great Norse god. So one of these extraordinary women is Valkyrie Sigurdrifa. We're gonna call her S for short. And when hero Sigurd met her, she was sleeping and dressed in full armor. Now, Sigurd was heading south towards the land of the Franks, France. Suddenly, he saw a great light on the mountain, as if a fire was burning, which blazed up to the sky. So he approached this castle, and when he entered the castle, he saw a warrior lying within it, asleep, completely armed. He first took the helmet off the warrior's head and saw it was a woman. Her defensive armor covering her body was kind of like molded to her, so he ripped it from the upper opening downwards and then through both sleeves, and then she woke up because like, whoa. When he asked her name, she took a horn filled with mead and gave him the memory drink. That's how he learned she was a Valkyrie. She mentioned that the two kings were at war with each other, and one of them was a great old warrior, to whom Odin had promised a victory. Sadly, she had defeated that specific warrior in battle, so as a punishment, Odin pricked her with a sleep thorn, a magical tool that could put someone into a long and deep sleep, and declared that she should never have victory in battle and should be given from now on in marriage. Well, in the end, Buddy asked her to share all of her wisdom with him, and she did that. Gave him all knowledge about prophecy, mystic wisdom, and the art of inscribing runes. And finally for today, the whole giant hunting business, it started with Odin. Why? Because he wanted power over seeing the future, something those giants were famous for. So why? Well, he wanted to know all the details of Ragnarok, how to prevent it. And the giants weren't keen on the idea of sharing their secrets, because they already knew about a lot of threats, because, well, future seeing abilities. So then you got this big war, breaking out between all these factions, one that resulted in the near extinction of the giants. The few remaining, nothing more than souls, and as far as we know, only survivors? Loki and a couple of others. Well, that's it for me once again, folks. I've been Alexa, your resident emo girly. See y'all next time I buzz in over here at Bumblebee.